Dabo Swinney has challenged Cade Klubnik. The redemption process is now. We'll talk about it right here on Locked on Clemson.
You are Locked on Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked on Clemson, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked on Clemson your first listen of the day. We're part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to the everydayers out there. You know who you are. Big salute to you. You know how we do it here on Locked On, exclusive Clemson content Monday through Friday, every single week. And if you're new to the show, welcome in. Thank you for being a part of the show. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button. About 75% of viewers, and there have been a lot in August and now in September, are not yet subscribed. So what are you waiting for? Get in there and get subscribed and be a part of the action. I would really appreciate it, and you will appreciate it as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Just like there are more to every player, more dedication, more attention to detail, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Stay tuned later in the episode for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. We're breaking down three big storylines that we have out this week. One is that redemption process, the redemption arc after the LSU loss, because as much as I can tell you all the things that frustrated me about the game, at the end of the day, we have to move forward and begin that build back towards the top of the hill. Why? Also, we'll talk about Clemson's defensive line and why I think that they're one of the biggest strengths and how much depth they have, what they proved to us versus LSU. And then we'll finish up with some of the things that Dabo Swinney said in his most recent press conference with the media, or at least meet with the media, about updates on injuries and what Clemson is doing on the medical side and the injury side to get ready for Georgia Tech. Now, again, I said Georgia Tech because, you know, they are going to play the Troy Trojans this Saturday. But the next big game in the sequence is really the start of the ACC, and it's a start at an away game at Georgia Tech. So Troy is kind of one of those ones where you're getting through a team that you believe that you will win. I mean, you're a 33.5 point favorite, so you will be getting a lot of guys healthy through that time and then getting them ready for Georgia Tech. So we'll finish that up in segment 3. Now, segment 1, I wanted to start off with Cade Klubnik again, and specifically, you know, this year has been different than all the other years, really, even with other quarterbacks. This is the first time in quite a long time that I've ever remembered Dabo Swinney just publicly calling out a quarterback in multiple areas, you know, mentioning how Cade struggled versus LSU, how he missed certain reads. They had multiple times where there were players that could have possibly ended up and resulted in a touchdown where he just didn't see them at all. Not only that, he missed the reads, but there was lack of rhythm. And ultimately, the team goes the way Cade goes. And if there's no rhythm, then there's no spark. And what does that mean for Clemson's future? Well, it all depends on how Cade responds to what Dabo's doing. And I love Dabo from a sense of a leadership aspect. He's never going to give you more than he doesn't think you can handle. And so the fact that he came out and he publicly did this is not because he wants to beat down Cade, and it's not because he doesn't think Cade can handle it. He actually believes Cade can handle it. And he would typically do these kind of things to leaders. Now, it's rare, as I mentioned, that he would do it to a quarterback. So I am kind of shocked in that way. But his postgame was blunt. Cade must play better. And today Dabo came out and praised Cade Klubnik's leadership, said he's, had great accountability to the problems that he was responsible for, says he's been owning it and really just gone back to work, going back to the fundamentals. It's interesting when you mention fundamentals because typically, what do you normally hear? You hear fundamentals going back to the basics when a team is struggling. Usually the teams that lose or having problems getting things going, what do the coaches say? Oh, they need to go back to the fundamentals. They need to go back to the basics. On the flip side, what do we talk about LSU after that win? What did we mention today on the radio? Man, it looks like they're pulling out all the stops. They're extremely creative. They're doing all kinds of things to attack the defense. So it is kind of funny to me how when a team is successful, we say that they're just massively creative. And when a team is not working well, we have to say that they need to go back to the basics. So that is kind of what you hear when you're on the side of the team that's losing or has lost the game. I do believe that there's some to that and getting Cade back to what we experienced, in some of the other games in 2024, but the consistency is still there. The concerns and consistency are still lingering for me with Cade. I do still believe that Clemson's ultimate ceiling depends on what Cade Klubnik can do moving forward and how he can begin that redemption process. The way that he will be able to respond will show us exactly how mature he is, because as you all know, for those of you who have been through college or have children who've been through college, there's one thing to be a senior, but there's one thing to act like a senior or be mature beyond your years. And so is Cade that guy to do so and rally the team? I do believe that Clemson's culture aids in that. And so he should be successful to rebound through Troy. But as we mentioned on the radio, Troy is not the game that anybody cares about rebounding from. It is really going to be a long process to build back from a disappointing loss against LSU. Cade's leadership and his abilities, first and foremost, he has to prove that he can fix himself and also help elevate the rest of the team. He's got to be better at his decision-making, better at his pocket awareness and presence and patience, and also better at his execution. LSU exposed weaknesses, and on the other side of it, the coaching staff has to be better at minimizing weaknesses. I said it today on the radio. He has to, the coaches and like Garrett Riley, Dabo Swinney, their responsibility is to minimize the weaknesses so you don't know what they are. When you look back at LSU, LSU is not a perfect team. They did not play perfectly. They had problems. Do you know any of their weaknesses? Can you remember any of them? Were they glaring weaknesses? No. And that is largely in part of what the coaching staff and the offensive coordinator was able to do in their first game against Clemson. Minimize the weaknesses to where even people watching, tens of thousands of people watching, don't really know what they are. The biggest thing for me from a fan perspective is obviously the run pass balance. That has nothing to do with Cade. That has everything to do with Garrett Riley. But then once you get that balance back, then he has to do better in those other things that he can control, like the decision-making, like the pocket awareness and the red zone, and just overall execution. So all eyes will be on Cade and how he rebounds, not just winning the game, because we all expect there to be a win, but it's how the team will play. Now, a lot of fans will just kind of casually walk through because, to be honest with you, the only way to redeem yourself from this is not to win Troy or Georgia Tech or Syracuse or Duke or SMU or anybody else. The only way to really redeem yourself from this kind of loss at the beginning of the season is to go destroy South Carolina Gamecocks at the end of the season. Well, unfortunately, that's November 29th. So we have a long way to go. So if you're part of this show and you like to listen in and tune in, we have to take it one day at a time, 1 week at a time. And the first thing is we need to see improvement from the quarterback play against the Troy Trojans. Even if it's for a small amount of time, we need to see it. All right, coming up next here on Locked On Clemson, we're going to talk about Clemson's defensive line depth and how it could be Clemson's biggest strength. Hey, Locked On Clemson fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code FOOTBALL, FOOTBALL, and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already need. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it is totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card to Amazon or other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. This episode is also brought to you by Mazda. This is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward, brought to you by those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. Because these moments do more than win, they push what's possible. They remind us to go the extra yard, shift into an extra gear, and keep moving the game forward. No matter what, even in the game against LSU, what keeps us moving forward is that we know the Clemson culture is right where it needs to be. The Clemson family will keep supporting their team, even through a win, even through a loss, no matter what. And we know that this team is stacked with a bunch of talented players that we can't wait to see 11 more games and maybe even more as this season continues. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Clemson's defensive line may be one of the keys to redeeming this season, to saving this season, to continue the season going through. They did really well against LSU, and we can't state it enough just how potent the LSU offense is, how much talent they have on that offense, and one of the best quarterbacks in the country, a ton of guys that are super fast. And I do believe that, while we would like to have seen a little bit more pressure, a lot more pressure on the quarterback, a lot of that has to do with the schemes that were shown against this defense from an offensive coordinator standpoint at LSU. 15 of 15. Garrett Nussmeier was 15 of 15 throwing behind the line of scrimmage. He completed 28 passes. So more, right at half of his passes were behind the line of scrimmage that were completed. And then about 22 out of 28 were 6 yards or less. So you only had 6 passes that I recorded that were beyond 6 yards that were completed by Garrett Nussmeier. And that's a testament to the pressure that they believed and that they continued to receive from the defensive front of Clemson, not just the defensive line and that rotation that they had, but also the linebackers, which didn't have as much rotation, but was still really putting a ton of pressure. Dabo Swinney mentioned that he feels like they were one of the stronger units of the game, and I have to agree with that. I think that's an area where you can build from. We know from the past that it's really good to know that you have a good defensive line and a good one that is filled with depth that you can trust. He mentioned a stat that I thought was kind of interesting. He said after LSU was held, or that first big carry that they had where, Wade Woodaz missed the tackle behind the line of scrimmage, even though he was there, LSU was held at 2.8 yards per carry, which, again, I mentioned to you, a great team that is a top rushing team in college football should be about 4.5 yards per carry. Neither team was at that. in this first game of the season. A little bit more disappointing that Clemson was, much worse and abandoned it all together. LSU did not abandon it. I think that's one of the reasons why they ultimately won the game. But even though it's still, many times you remember looking at Caden Durham and he would just hit a brick wall. And that's a huge testament to that brick wall, which was the Clemson defensive line front. They were 2.8 yards per carry for 58 minutes in the game. So they held them much lower than expected than the national average. So it would have been one of the lower rushing attacks in the country on average if they, had not had a couple of big ones at the very beginning. But when you look at the defensive line, and what I really want to kind of highlight is that rotation that Dabo Swinney mentioned about. And I didn't think it was going to be as rotated as much as it was. I was kind of shocked, at the amount that they had guys rotating in through. It seemed as if Stefan Green, I believe he was listed as a starter and he came out first, or he was a co-starter and came out first. So that was kind of a shock to me. Jaheim Lawson getting in as many rotations as he was, Vic Burley, Cade Denhoff, even Champ Thompson got in some reps, I believe. So I think the biggest highlight of the game was just Stefan Green and his ability to get in there and get as many snaps as he did. But the rotation looks pretty good. There's still a little bit of concern here and there from some of the bigger chunk plays that they got every now and then, but you can tell that it is much more subdued than it was last season. So there's been a lot of progression on the team and development on the defensive line and limitation of those big gash plays, especially from the running backs that hurt you so bad in 2024. So you can see there's been some instant improvement from the defensive line, and they feel very confident in being able to rotate, a ton of guys through. As I mentioned, TJ Parker and Cade Denhoff. Will Helt, one thing about Will Helt is that he really played two different sides of the ball. I mean, he was playing left end a couple of times. He was playing right end a couple of times. Then Peter Woods was pretty solid as well. We've seen a couple of his highlight films where he's just tossing guys around. Unfortunately, with the quick snaps and the quick dump offs and the short passes behind the line of scrimmage, the defensive interior just gets eat up pretty quick. Even if they make a really good first move, the play's already much further away from them. So Peter Woods, Vic Burley, Stefan Green, DeMonte Capehart don't show up as much in this LSU game. And you think, man, what did they really do? Well, they did a ton, but the LSU offense also did a ton to kind of stay away from them, really. Again, it kind of goes back to what I said in segment one. The best offensive coordinators avoid their weaknesses. They know their weaknesses. They know their weak areas, their weak players, their weak plays, and their matchups that they're weak in. And they avoid those. I'm not saying at all costs, because you don't want to get to a point. I mean, you're going to be outmatched sometimes, and you don't want to get to a point where you only have like one or two options. But it comes down to not being able to or seeing how long you can go from having the other team figure out where your biggest weakness is. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of a problem with Clemson, knowing that they're not very confident in their run game. I think they should be more than they are, but they're not. For whatever reason. Linebackers also is one thing that Dabo mentioned that he likes a lot, but didn't get a ton of work in rotation. We didn't see Jeremiah Alexander. That's one of the players that I circled in my radio show that I was very frustrated with, along with Tristan Smith, who actually did get a couple of snaps. Jeremiah Alexander didn't get any snaps. So I'm really kind of confused by that. And it goes back to that jadedness of Dabo Swinney and the coaching staff. You talk this big game about Jeremiah Alexander, and then you don't use him at all. That's where you get kind of jaded as a fan, and it frustrates me, and I'm sure it frustrates you as well. I'm just trying to be a voice of the fan base and kind of echo that. The linebackers, he mentioned that while they did well, he does want to rotate them more than we saw. So hopefully in the Troy game and then going forward, we'll see more of a rotation of guys. I'm really looking forward to seeing Jeremiah Alexander. Also, Brandon Strozier. I'm thinking he was one of those guys that had no snaps either. which is another guy that was promoted a ton in the fall and bragged about a ton, and then you don't see him at all. That's really the frustrating part as a fan. Clemson having depth, though, allows them to continue to have success throughout the whole game and be as fresh as possible in the fourth quarter, but also throughout a long season. As I mentioned, the regular season, even though we have one frustrating loss under our belt, they still have 11 more games to go. And this defensive front, with the rotation that they already have and they're able to trust against a team like LSU, can hopefully last and be something that they can anchor around. So to me, I agree with Dabo. Defensive line playing at this level is going to disrupt most offenses, and it's going to hurt most teams in the ACC. You're going to have to probably pull out the same strategy as LSU did, because if you try to just run straight at Clemson's defensive front, I think you're going to have no luck at all. So we could have seen a little bit of a blueprint, or the other teams, in fact, in the ACC could have seen a little bit of a blueprint against Clemson's defensive line. Don't attack them straight up. That would be against their strength. Try to dump the ball off quickly and not allow Peter Woods, DeMonte Capehart, Stephon Green, and those guys, Vic Burley, do not allow Will Helt, TJ Parker, do not allow those guys time to get back to the backfield or to you or even to the ball carrier. So I think that is one area where I'm a little concerned we might have a blueprint, or at least the opponent might have a blueprint. But I do like overall the amount of rotation that they had. All right, so we're talking about defensive line. I wanted to switch over in segment 3 and jump over to the offensive line a little bit and some of the injury updates that Dabo gave us, and we'll wrap up the show. So the everydayers, thank you so much for hanging with me. This is Locked on Clemson. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down. The guy for me this week was Ronan Hannafin, safety for the Clemson Tigers. He delivered in a big way because he had 12 total tackles, led the team in his tackles, and he was all over the field, especially with a critical red zone forced fumble turnover from the defense. So Ronan Hannafin gets on my list as the MVP standout who delivered for this weekend. Even though the team didn't finish out with a win, it's still allowed them to stay in it, and it showed that the defense is ready and hungry to fight. For Clemson and Ronan Hannafin, he delivered in a big way, and just like Ronan Hannafin delivered for Clemson, DoorDash delivers to you on Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You can save every Saturday you order, stack it all up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Walker Parks is getting healthier, but Clemson's offensive line still a big work in progress, more of a work in progress than we ever really thought. And, they took another blow with Easton Ware now out for the season on the offensive line, but he's not somebody that I thought would really be in the rotation, as he's very young. So it may not really impact them for 2025, but he's going to have to get into rehab and come back after having shoulder surgery. So we won't see any of him, but I didn't think you'd see much of him. But the guys you did see, you're probably a little bit frustrated with. I'm sure if you're a Clemson fan, Tristan Lee, there's just so many video clips of him getting beat off the ball, getting, twisted up. Colin Sadler, same thing. Those two guys just had a tough game against LSU. Ryan Linthicum, actually, I don't see a ton of negative or anything from him. So he kind of avoided any of the criticism on the offensive line, which is a good thing. Walker Parks wasn't playing, so they rotated through Elijah Thurman and Harris Sewell. And I do kind of agree with LSU fans who say, that do you feel a little bit jaded because you got this information that Walker Parks was okay, he suited up, but they never played him? And for me, I do feel as if Clemson's best offensive linemen that get all the hype sometimes still have a lot of concerns and problems. Walker Parks being one of those, Blake Miller being one of those. Those two guys constantly get preseason accolades and hype. But we see as Clemson fans, when we're watching it week in and week out, it's still just a very inconsistent. So whether or not you had Walker Parks or not, I think you'd still be dealing with a lot of inconsistency on the staff or in the group of offensive linemen. They rotated through with Elijah Thurman and Harris Sewell. Those two guys you feel like you'd be pretty confident in. I feel as if there wasn't a lot of scrutiny among those two guys either. It really kind of comes down to positioning, scheming, and just how they were attacking the defense. You look back at some of the videos that I've shared over on X at the Morgan T Show. And I'm not trying to portray that I'm some sort of offensive line coach. I'm not trying to portray that I'm a coach in any means, or that I'm a player in any means. I'm not any of those things. But what I am trying to say is I can see where these things aren't working. It makes sense that this player can't get to this spot in time. It makes sense that the player that ends up blowing up the play could have been blocked if things were adjusted, just small little tweaks here and there. It is frustrating that, a multi-million-dollar program in college football of Clemson Tigers and the staff that they have seems to still be having these problems, and the roster that they have seems to still be having these problems. That is very frustrating because, you don't want me out there fixing it or anything like that. You want those guys that are in those positions to do it. I think the staff is one of the best staffs in the country, and the staff can fix it. But there's also that lingering thought, like, why does it need to be fixed? Why wasn't it prevented? So I have that question. I understand that we should trust the coaches, trust the process, and trust them and their experience to fix it. But why was it leaking in the first place? I don't understand that. That's where I get most of my confusion. Why are some of these guys that we hyped up, graduate Tristan Lee, redshirt junior Colin Sadler, junior Harris Sewell, graduate Ryan Linthicum, graduate Walker Parks, senior Blake Miller? Why? I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. The list I just gave you is all guys that are seasoned veterans that should have limited to no problems, and their weakness should be very, very difficult to find. But as I mentioned, for the whole first game of the season, it seems against LSU, the weaknesses were easy to find. Dabo Swinney mentioned it. They weren't really throwing, they meaning LSU, weren't really throwing anything exotic at Clemson. So that's another concern there too. Offensive line depth determines, just in the same way that Cade Klubnik's rebound and leadership and his ability to fix his execution problems, the ability for the offensive line to rotate, possibly replace some guys that aren't performing to the standard, but also to progress as the season goes on, will dictate the rest of the season. Can they redeem themselves or not? I go back to, it's frustrating to have to say they have to redeem themselves, but that's where we're at. We're at that point where they have to. Now, will Walker Parks come back against Troy? It's hard to say. I would assume no. I would assume everything now, if anybody has anything lingering, they're healing until Georgia Tech, which is an away game in Atlanta. Also, it kind of might give opportunities for guys like Braden Jacobs and Elijah Thurman to get a little bit more reps and to figure out, who is your next man up, or who maybe deserves a little bit more snaps than even the guys that you assumed would be the starters. Clemson, at the end of the day, regardless of what name they have there on the rotation or out there on the field, needs to be more consistent, needs to work better together in their core five. And if they don't trust their core five, then they've got to do something. They got to do something to fix that, to improve that ability to trust that group, or they've got to replace some of these guys. Sometimes loyalty is 99% of the time, loyalty is a great thing. There's that 1% of a time where it's like, you know what? It's time to move on, and maybe there's a player that is getting a lot of starting reps that it's time to just give to someone else. I don't know who that is. That's what the coaches are getting paid the big bucks for. But to me, you've got to do what you can to find as much depth as possible. Troy would be the best place for you to find your depth at offensive line in a real live scenario, and then make some more decisions about who truly is those five guys, because the five guys that we saw against LSU, unfortunately, walked away with a ton of film looking rather ridiculous in a lot of ways. And it was unfortunate. And I hate that for the team, because I know they put in a lot of effort and a lot of time practicing to come out and be kind of having these highlight films that kind of embarrassing, I'm sure is frustrating for them. And another thing that will help the offensive line, this seems kind of simple, but it's just not forgetting about the run game. I talked about this with Walt Deptula on the radio. Offensive linemen want to eat. They want to slam you. They want to push you to the ground. They want to lead the charge in the run game. And if you stop doing that altogether, then just always making them in pass protection kind of frustrates them in a lot of ways too. Also on the injury watch, I'm assuming we're not going to see Antonio Williams for the Troy game. That was another big hit for Clemson, because they had, as you could tell, they had planned for him to kind of be their Xavier Thomas. They planned for him to kind of spell as a running back. They used him a little bit, and then he got injured. And the one big concern I have is if it's truly one of those hamstring things, you really never know. Anybody that I've ever met that's had a hamstring problem, a lot of times those can stick around for much, much longer. You don't want to rush him back. And so I would assume Clemson's passing game would need to do what they can do against Troy without him, and possibly see what they can do with him against Georgia Tech. Is the offensive line strong enough to protect Cade Klubnik? Well, they've got to redeem themselves and prove it. Can Cade Klubnik in the passing game move forward without having Antonio Williams? That's also another prove it statement that I hope that we can find out this Saturday and the next couple of Saturdays as we keep going. Hey, thank you so much again for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today. There's another big moment in Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview show only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday through the season, only on Fire TV. Hey, that's it for this show. I'll see you on Friday as we get ready for the Troy game. Hopefully you get out there to see it. We're almost at the end of the week and getting ready for week 2. So thank you so much for being part of the show, and also all of my everydayers hanging with me to the very end of the show. And as always, Tiger fans, I'll see you tomorrow, and I'll see you at the top of the hill.